Right. Let us go ahead and get started. Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you for joining. I know we've had a lot going on in general and a lot of TFC content in addition to your normal projects as well. So I appreciate all of you making the time for our first all Pennsylvania call. This is a great opportunity for us to connect across project types, which I know we haven't done much of yet. So this is a great opportunity to talk a little bit about Pennsylvania and to talk about some of the common themes that we're all going to be working through for the remainder of the election cycle. So I am working directly with most of you, but not all of you, but I'm Craig. I am the state director for Pennsylvania. We have Dylan here as well, who is our texting program director. So Dylan is leading our texting projects for all of our states. So Dylan and I are working closely together with all of you and with all of our campaign partners on all the great work that we're doing. So what we have on the agenda today is to just take a little bit of a broader view of that work and what we're doing across the state, a little bit of updates on what we're seeing and some insights that we have from some of the data that TFC collects, and then really talk about get out the vote and what's coming in the next final 3+ weeks and how we can align our messages, stay ahead of what's coming, and finish strong. And of course, we want to finish with questions and knowledge sharing. We want this to be an interactive session and as much about teams connecting with each other and sharing content with each other as much as Dylan and I talking to you. So with that in mind, feel free, this is an open format, so feel free to jump in with questions along the way, use the chat. Dylan or I will be keeping an eye on chat. In fact, Dylan, I might ask while I'm talking, if you don't mind, keeping an eye on that and bringing up any questions that come up. We'll share a few examples, but really not many in this session. We're hoping that you all can share some things that you're working on, that you're doing. And then, continue this conversation on Slack and our Pennsylvania channel and across the other TFC channels that we have. So 24 days. And I know we talk about 24 days until election day. You all know this is really 24 days until election day ends, especially in Pennsylvania. And just to bring that to life, the election is on. So we have across Pennsylvania, 2.5 million vote by mail ballots that have been requested, and those ballots are out and those ballots are coming back in. So just to provide some detail on that, you can see that in particular, some of the counties that our teams are working with, Allegheny County, we've got a bunch of campaigns. They are at 29% already of ballots that have been returned. Chester County, where we've got Team Cerisi, is at 15%. Northampton County is at 21% for Tara Zrinski. And I know we've got other folks in the Lancaster and Harrisburg and Lock Haven area. So we got a bunch that's happening, but the most important point is that the get out the vote period in the election is happening now. So we talk about election day, but it's happening as we speak and will only continue between now and the 3rd. So just to take a little bit of a step back, and I know we've talked about this when we kick off our projects a lot, but it's worth remembering what is at stake in Pennsylvania and why it's so important for us to win. Arguably, and I will strongly argue, that Pennsylvania is the most important state in the 2020 election. If you are following Nate Silver and 538, it's the state that is most likely to be the tipping point state for the Electoral College. It is strategic for a number of reasons. Just to go back to 2016, Trump only won Pennsylvania by a little over 40,000 votes. And in the context of some of the work that TFC really focuses on around control of state houses, it's worth noting that the GOP expanded to a 39-seat margin in the Pennsylvania House in 2016. Now, by contrast, in 2010, before Republicans invested heavily to take control of state houses, Democrats had a 2-seat majority in the Pennsylvania House. And their ability to flip that chamber in 2010 set the stage for them really running the table through the 2016 election and getting to that place in early 2017 where they had a 39-seat margin in the House. That pendulum started to swing back in 2018, where the governor won statewide pretty convincingly, and Democrats flipped 11 seats in the House, which brought us down to our current gap, which is 9 seats. So, across Pennsylvania, TFC is focused on flipping the House. That is obviously important for redistricting, which is coming up next cycle, for breaking the control of the legislature by Republicans. An important thing to note about redistricting in Pennsylvania is that, unlike many states, the governor does not have a veto on those maps. And so we really do need to flip that chamber, because that will be our only real opportunity to exert power on that process. And that is going to be 10 years worth of bad maps if we don't. So that's what we're up against. There are 18 seats to protect, including some first-term incumbents, open seats, and tight races. And between the volunteer projects that all of you are working on for TFC, and some of the tools that TFC provides more broadly, we're working through the cycle with 26 campaigns and 54 volunteer projects to make that a reality. And so, when we think about, there's been a lot, and even just today, if folks caught the New York Times, the daily segment on Pennsylvania, it's really at the center of a lot of the realignments that we hear about when we think about kind of the changing partisan structure of the country. And, TFC's races, hopefully this will seem familiar to you depending on what races you're working on. There's, elements of this in most of the places we're working, which is, in some places, protecting and helping grow the gains that we've made, especially in suburbs and exurbs, places that are getting more diverse, places that, kind of white collar professionals that are trending more blue. And on the other side of that coin, there is, winning back and trying to maintain a coalition that is a little bit older for the Democratic Party. And we see this a lot in Western Pennsylvania for a lot of our races there. More blue collar folks that are older, whiter, more likely to be Trump Democrats, in many cases, voters that are likely to still vote for Trump, but we want to cross over down the ballot. So that is a little bit what we are on the front lines of doing. And really it's sort of the crossroads of what's happening at a national level, and Pennsylvania is kind of the bellwether example of that in many ways. So what we've been up to. So as I mentioned, 54 projects that we have worked on over the course of the cycle. A lot of those are websites that have been completed, but we have 32 that are active right now. So that's 9 email teams, 13 ads teams, and 10 texting projects. And Dylan will talk a little bit about how teams are aligning to those projects. But that is a lot of activity happening. And needless to say, we are showing up in force in Pennsylvania to really move the needle. And the work that we are doing to help energize these campaigns and help them execute on the ground, we can't overstate the importance of that, especially for these folks. The places that we're working wouldn't otherwise have that kind of investment to do the nature of the outreach that we're doing. And just to think a little bit about how these pieces fit together, when you think about all the pieces of what campaign outreach looks like, it's kind of reflected in the work that we're doing. So email projects, we are focusing a lot on rallying our core base of supporters, making sure that they are energized, making sure that they're donating and funding the campaign. And those teams have been at that for a while to cultivate those relationships and to make sure that we've really brought along those supporters into the race and make sure they understand what's at stake and are really helping power both financially and from, in volunteer terms and other ways, be the core of some of these campaigns teams. From the ads perspective and the texting perspective, that's much more about taking the case more broadly. So, we've got our ads teams that are doing a lot of introduction and name ID and awareness and starting to introduce, these candidates, their personalities, what they stand for, what are the issues that they're running on. And, our texting teams are doing one-to-one voter contact and engagement. So especially now during COVID, when you think about the nature of those essential field operations and reaching out and talking to voters, that is where, digital means come in particular something like texting that we can, scale, but also keep very personal and build off of the work that we're doing. So these things taken together, we're really covering a huge section of what powers these campaigns. So we should feel really good about what the sum of our effort is, the fact that we get to do these not in isolation, but working together, both for our candidates and also across teams. Any thoughts, Dylan, that I missed?
I think the only thing I would add is that, and it was something you really highlighted, there is definitely overlap between the goals of email ads and texting. And we'll get into it in a bit. Texting's focus is primarily on get out the vote, but given the races that we're working on and where they are on the ballot, we're still trying to improve name ID and even a little bit of persuasion. So there's a lot of overlap with the goals that the ads teams have as well.
Yep. Great point. So before we get into the project-specific detail, it's worth taking a broader look at some of the competitive landscape. And this is data that we have and that all of you have access to as well through a product that we built called Tabella, which aggregates digital spending across Facebook and Google and gives us an easy way to really look at the big picture of digital spend in the states that we care about. And so there's some good news here. This is the statewide picture, so this includes all spending. But as you can see, the level of energy and the level of investment from Democrats generally is a healthy lead and an increasing one on Republicans. Obviously, we've got some important weeks left to go, but this is a rough indicator of some of the energy and some of the focus on getting the message out statewide. As you might expect at the statewide level, a lot of these big investors are the big national campaigns. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, some of the affiliated PACs and committees that work in really pushing those statewide messages. So this is obviously an important part of the overall picture. We care about a much more focused scope here. So kind of drilling into the Pennsylvania House view, we can see that similar trend. We've got Democrats far outpacing, albeit at a much smaller scale. So that was millions of dollars here, which we're talking about tens of thousands. And that makes sense because these are 203 races rather, and they're small districts. It's great to see that we have, if we look on the right of the top 20, the majority by far are Democrats, and 5 of them are TFC projects. So we've got Joe Walz, Pam Snyder, number 16 is Sharon Guidi. I know it's cut off. We've got Byron, and we've got Tara Zrinski. And then Patty Smith, I know you're 21. I was looking in there. I wanted to squeeze in more, but the rest of us are not far behind, and that's pretty awesome because we are really kind of representing in a significant way. And in most of these cases, our competitors are not spending. So we're really seizing the initiative and taking advantage of getting our message out and really reaching voters and reaching folks at an important time. So this is a really important view, although it's worth noting it's not the only view. And so the other piece of this, and the thing that we want to keep a close eye on, is the independent expenditures. And so these individual campaigns are small, and so they probably are going to be spending some amount of money, and we'll see that go up, but there will continue to be really, in many ways, the lion's share of money coming from some of these outside groups. And this is where, in particular, a lot of the attack ads come from. Commonwealth Leaders Fund is one of those PACs that has been pretty active this cycle. They spent about $250,000 so far. And that is oscillated between what they've been focusing on. But this is a PAC that has ties to Betsy DeVos and some of the DeVos family money. They are big on charter schools. They are big on pushing, you can see here some of the reopening rallies that happened earlier in the COVID outbreak, but they have been actively attacking both in digital and also in mass media several of our candidates. We've got Patty Smith and Pam Snyder and Frank Burns, who's another candidate we worked with. They've been running some of these ads. At the moment, they are quiet and they're focusing on some statewide races, but this is really important because when the attacks come, and especially in these last couple of weeks, these are the places that we want to be paying attention to closely for when the hit pieces come and when people start entering at the last minute with large dollar amounts. So I mentioned before, and the link is a couple slides ago, but I'll make sure everyone has it. If you haven't had a chance to access Tabella, this is available to all volunteers. It's a great tool to see what's happening, to look at your campaign, to get a quick read on an early warning on, if someone starts to attack the candidates that we're working with. So I encourage everyone to take a look at it and, surface, especially if you're seeing any good insights, share it with the channel, make sure that you're letting other folks know about it. Thoughts, questions on that before I move on? Okay, so looking at emails real quick, this is just a quick view across all of our teams. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 9 of them running. At this point, our teams are up and running and have been, active, some for months and some a little bit shorter. But we're in that period of time where we have emails going out. We've established a cadence, and we are thinking about the end game. And so we've spent a lot of time talking about cultivating our lists, focusing on engagement, segmenting, and trying to dial in to the most strategic ways to reach these folks. And that's really the focus of our emails team going forward in this last stretch, is to make sure that we can get as much out of these programs for the final push. We've already generated a bunch of money, almost $45,000. We expect that'll continue to rise in the next couple of weeks, but we're hitting the point where a lot of our teams are generating some of their biggest fundraising totals of this cycle, and that's on the basis of really kind of building that relationship over time. And we'll continue that, and then we'll also focus on making sure that our supporters know exactly what they need to do to vote, to get their friends and family to vote, to volunteer, and to power our campaigns through the last part of the cycle. Switching over to ads. So as I mentioned, 13 ads teams up and running. Mostly focused on awareness. We did some acquisition earlier in the cycle, but we have teams that have started and done a bunch of awareness and candidate ID content, and now we are really coming up against the end game, and in particular with the upcoming ad freeze, which we'll talk a little bit about. We are making sure that we can develop our final concepts, get them tested, and get them locked in for the rest of the cycle. And what we're seeing is, especially recently, we've had some good success getting traction, getting visibility. But as just referring back to that huge uptick in spend from Tabella, that's a good indicator that the rest of the campaign world is catching up and starting to spend as well. So that means that feeds are only going to get noisier. There's just going to be more competing for users' attention, which ups the game for us to continue to vary our content, to mix things up, to get attention. And that's the challenge that we have, to break through and to keep, find the best ways to reach folks and to make sure that they're paying attention.
One thing, Craig, there's one individual who's on their phone and there's a bit of reverb going on. If you're calling on and also on your computer, you might be able to see the chat. If you could please mute. If not, please mute, because it would really help. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. All right. Want to take us through texting a bit?
Sure. So this is primarily a bit of context for folks who are not on texting teams. Unlike ads and emails, our texting projects are actually working across multiple campaigns, anywhere from 1 to 3 campaigns in Pennsylvania, though the Centre County Dems are actually supporting multiple candidates as well within Centre County. And the reason behind the strategy is because the teams are 100% focused on get out the vote. And there's a lot of parallels even across campaigns in terms of the messaging, the times at which you'll reach out, and the analysis that we run to help our campaigns understand whether or not their texting is actually having an impact on the metrics that matter. So we actually have 5 teams working across these 10 campaigns, and it seems like every other day we add a new campaign, so who knows what it's going to be like next week. But as I alluded to earlier, our focus is on GOTV, though we still need to include name ID as a focus, because many times you're texting someone about Patty Smith and the first response is, who's Patty? So there's a lot of opportunity for us and for our teams to continue to engage with these individuals who are primarily supporters of Democrats, or at least likely to be supporters of Democrats, but need a little bit of a push over the finish line to actually get out and vote. Craig, could you hop to the next slide? One back, if that's all right. Great. So in terms of the GOTV texting impact we've seen, Pennsylvania has been really, really active from a texting perspective. And one of the nice things, unlike other states, is that the up ballot races and the other independent organizations that are texting do not seem to be abusing their privilege and power, which means that when we also reach out, we end up seeing a pretty decent response rate, a decent positive response rate, and pretty low negative response rate or opt-out rate. And those are the primary metrics that we try to keep an eye on to make sure we're successful. When we're actually doing this outreach, some things that we've noticed is that the texts that are most impactful typically are targeted at not just a broad turnout universe or a broad universe of people who need to vote by mail, but when we take it one step further and we engage with individuals who are have already indicated support for a candidate in the past, or even first-time voters who just need a bit of a push to get familiar with the voting process within Pennsylvania. Especially with everything that's happening, and I'm sure Craig is going to speak to this in a few minutes, where there's shifting deadlines, naked ballots. Another thing that's been really powerful in our texting outreach is when we make sure that our messaging focuses on providing a service to the recipient rather than the generic, hey, I'm so-and-so for X candidate, can we count on your vote? And that's been particularly impactful for folks like Tara Zirinsky and some of the other candidates around Lancaster when they've tried to provide more of a service in their A/B tests. You can go to the next slide, Craig, if that's all right. Over the next few weeks, it'll be very interesting to see if we'll keep the same response rate, opt-out rate, negative response rate for people who aren't in texting land. There's been a lot of changing guidelines, like there are with ad freezes, that mean we have to include messaging that's causing unsubscribe rates to really skyrocket. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, but it's been really exciting to see how the teams are adapting their approach and continuing to get people to engage and say they're either going to vote by mail or make sure that they're going to vote on election day. And for individuals who are not in texting land, if you are interested in getting access to this, hop over to the texting teams channel and we can make sure you get access. Becca asked about providing examples of providing a service to the recipient that have worked well. So to be clear, we're still quite early on in the process for Get Out the Vote. A lot of GOTV is typically precipitated by things like ballots drop in a particular area, and so you get in touch with people to see if they've gotten their ballots, or closer to election day, you get in touch with folks to remind them of the steps they need to take to go vote. What we've seen work so far, and it's anecdotal, it's not statistically significant, is around basically giving people a prompt to flag their own concerns and say, hey, do you know how to go, how to make sure that you can accurately and successfully submit your ballot? And that gives you an opportunity to engage with them about concerns regarding naked ballot and other ramifications.
Hey, Dylan, I had a question. I'm on the ads team for Sharon Goody's campaign. Mm-hmm. Is there any way we can be better connecting the dots between what like the texting team is doing and what ads we're doing, whether that's like uploading, the cell phone numbers of people who don't know about the candidate or people who want to opt out or whatever it might be, and kind of figure out a way to either target or exclude those people from the ads campaign?
Yes, definitely. For Sharon, they haven't actually started texting yet, so we're very excited to get Alex and Sharon starting to text
Sure,
next week.
sure.
But heavy plus on that. Craig and I are going to be working on this afternoon even ways that we can coordinate across texting, ads, and other projects.
Fabulous.
And one of the ways which I talked about many campaigns, if not most of them, is around this idea of ballot chase. So a lot of what texting teams are doing is getting folks to return those ballots. You saw some of these counties are already approaching a third of ballots in. We want to lock those in as soon as possible, and we can hit that multiple ways. We can target them directly through texting. We can also target them through digital ads to do the same. Cool. That all set with you, Dylan?
Yeah, all set. Thanks, Craig.
Cool. All right. So get out the vote time. Let's talk about what some of the themes and some of the messages that we're going to be hitting across all of our projects. Obviously, we've mentioned this. It is hugely important nationwide and in Pennsylvania, but vote by mail is really driving a ton of our activity. What is special about Pennsylvania in particular is that this is new for the state this year. And there are really a lot of it in many ways is untested, and a lot of it's changing pretty frequently. So Pennsylvania really rolled out a package, legislative package earlier this year before COVID without any sort of awareness of what was about to happen that made mail-in voting a lot more accessible. But in doing so, there's just been a ton of process that hasn't been hammered out. And so that has continued to evolve. And the big challenge for us is to make sure that we are, one, staying on top of what the latest developments are, and two, doing our best to communicate the right information clearly to our voters, to our supporters at the right time, so that we are giving them accurate, unambiguous, and timely messages. So that is a huge part of what we are thinking about across all of our project types. Just to put some color around that, there has just, I don't know of a state that has had more drama around its mail-in voting processes. It seems that every procedural change or attempt to make mail-in voting more accessible or simpler has been fought tooth and nail, unsurprisingly, by Republicans, and taking that up to the highest possible levels. So for a period of time, there were challenges to a lot of these provisions, and including some executive orders from the governor on trying to loosen some of the restrictions. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court made some changes that loosened that about a month ago. In particular, things like, and we'll talk a little bit more, changing the voter deadline for mail-in ballots to being received on election day to being postmarked by election day. That was a big one. And then also allowing ballot drop boxes, which previously weren't available. So those are two of the things, but again, there's just a ton of procedural things happening. Dylan mentioned naked ballots. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but making sure that there's this security envelope that ballots need to be returned in. If you don't do that, the vote gets tossed. There's currently no way to remedy that. So there are huge and high stakes to these rules and getting this information out that, in a state that was decided last time by 40,000 votes, could be material. So these are the types of things that we need to make sure that we are staying very close communication with our campaigns on, following the news, and really sharing the most local and accurate guidance, right? Some of this stuff is going to vary county to county, district to district, especially when it comes to Dropbox locations and things like that. So just a reminder that we should be, as up to date as we can on those developments. And just to review some high-level deadlines, the voter registration deadline is coming up on the 19th. That is the last date that someone can register to vote, and they can do that online. The next deadline is the 27th, and it's technically the last day to request a mail-in ballot, but it really shouldn't be something that we message around as a deadline, because practically speaking, that is too late and too close to the wire to reasonably expect a registrar to process an application, mail out a ballot, have the ballot be received, have the ballot be completed, sent back in, and postmarked by the 3rd. So for our purposes, even though that is the deadline, and most campaigns are managing well in advance, we really do want to make sure that those messages to the extent that we're communicating around them at all, are really that there's no time to waste. The election's happening. If you haven't requested your mail-in ballot and you want to, do that as soon as possible. If you have your ballot, get it in as soon as possible. And then obviously election day is the 3rd. There is not a early voting in person process by and large. I mean, you can sort of request your ballot and vote the same day, but that's a kind of an edge case. Primarily voting in person is on election day, as well as that postmark date for mail-in ballots, and those ballots have to be received by the local registrars by that Friday by 5 p.m. So these are our key deadlines. Again, as early as possible for all of this stuff. That's the main message is don't wait. Don't hesitate to do any of these things. So how we message around that, I just want to share a couple of ad examples that teams are using. So I know in ads trainings and information that Greg and others have shared, our job first and foremost is to drive name awareness for our candidates and make sure that their bio, their platform is front and center of the limited budget and attention that we can push for them. There are groups out there, state parties, PACs, that are doing a lot of the messaging more broadly around voting deadlines, around signing up for vote by mail. So we don't need to carry the full burden of that. Obviously, we want to communicate around some of that. So when we talk about get out the vote messaging, whether it's by email, whether it's through ads or texting, we want to make sure that we are always including our candidate, including their name, sharing something about them, so that it is not just about process, but it is also about make sure that you're turning your ballot in early for Joe Cerisi. And so that's an example here. Find your Dropbox and vote for Joe. There's a message here that Joe's a bipartisan leader. Make sure that we're including that content in all of the things that we're doing. Same thing for Dana Hamkulik. Don't vote naked. This just went out and is doing pretty well. But make sure that, make your vote for Dana count. Don't submit your mail-in ballot without its secrecy envelope. So we can send a single mom and domestic violence survivor to Harrisburg. So that's a great example of putting the context in the candidate identity around the message around early voting. And then on the right, this South Carolina example, which talks about early voting, which again doesn't apply in the same way to Pennsylvania, but is a great example of one of the themes that was just shared earlier this week at the ad training around developing some engaging content around like an animated text thread. So I know some teams are looking at this and trying to do something similar. Let's share those examples, and especially if they're successful, let's make sure that we're using those tactics, especially as the noise level continues to increase and we want to break through.
Craig, we have a question that's come through.
Yeah.
From Talton. Why wouldn't we message turnout voters regarding the opportunity to vote early? Is it too cumbersome in Pennsylvania?
So voting early in Pennsylvania is voting by mail. So the message is, if you want to vote early, you need to request a mail-in ballot, and you need to return that mail-in ballot. So that's we want to make sure that if we're using that message, or if we're messaging to people that have requested mail-in ballots, we can share that information. But what we want to make sure we do as well, or centrally, is to make sure that our candidate is really branded in that communication. So you see these two examples that neither of them contain pictures of the candidate, but they both have their logo. They both talk about the candidate, their bio, and why we should vote for them. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Our candidate seems to think that his voters can vote early if they go to the county voting office.
So that is the edge case. You can go and request a mail-in ballot and return it right there, and that is effectively early voting, but is in the way that most people would, run an early voting program. It's not you go to a ballot box, you fill out the form, and you leave. So that's the complication. We want to be a little bit, clearer about what it is we're talking about. And there is a way to do it same day. But again, we're layering on a whole bunch of complexity, which starts to muddle the message. So I think in texting, that can work because you are having a one-to-one conversation, and you can make sure that you are like, tracking with somebody, but as a broad-based kind of media message, I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, the freeze. So this is for ads teams, but it is important for other teams to be aware of. So most of you know that Facebook is instituting a freeze on new creative on the 27th, which means that any political advertising that runs after the 27th has to have been approved and active before that point. It's not that they won't allow political communications, it's just that they don't want to be approving new content, and that is their attempt to protect against misinformation that happens late and may drive may drive the narrative in a way that they can't get their arms around. So this is interesting. This will be this is a bit new, and so we're not quite sure how well it's going to work. But the most important thing for us at TFC is that we want to be well prepared and very proactive around that. So that means that for our purposes, we've set the deadline a week before that, because we know that leading up to this deadline, everyone else in the world is going to be rushing to get all their last ads in. That is likely, very likely, to contribute to hiccups and delays. And what we don't want to have happen is have our campaigns be caught out. So most of you on ads teams are aware of this. Your campaigns are aware of this. It's important because we are a week and a half from the 20th, which means that now is really the time to develop as many creative concepts as possible, to test as many, and to make sure that as we enter the freeze, we're using the best content that we can. So more broadly, staying ahead of the final 3.5 weeks, similar to the recommendations for ads, that's a hard constraint with the ad freeze, but it really applies certainly to email. Now is the time to be planning for in texting. Now is the time to be planning for the rest of the calendar. Email teams, most of you have calendars that are built out through the rest of the cycle. If not, we need to lock that down. Make sure that we have clarity on the key messages, on the content, on the cadence, all those communications. If it can be done, approved, written now, it should be. We should be doing that. Thinking about emails, for example, those last week of get out the vote emails, we should be writing them now. We should be getting them approved now. And the way we want to position it to campaigns is, look, we don't want to be asking for your time and attention in the last 2 weeks to approve things that you could take care of now. So we want to front load. We want to make sure that when things really get crazy, both from our perspective and for yours, that we're spending our time adjusting and reacting and being agile, as opposed to trying to catch up with the last crush. So this is the chance to really make sure that we're getting ahead of that. And over the next week, both from an ads creative and an email content, we should be pushing that forward. And I know, Dylan, you all are planning for the final get out the vote messaging as well.
And on texting, I know it can be difficult to, because there's so many moving parts around script, universe, dates, and the like. We will be putting together a template that teams, particularly team leads, can use to try and get on the front foot with their texting projects and campaigns, and it should be available early next week. So stay tuned for that, because just like with email and ads, getting on the front foot will be important. The last few days before the election are going to be crazy, and it'll be nice to have things just running as smoothly as possible.
And then the last point on strategy, again, we talked about this from a creative perspective, email perspective. We want to make sure that we are thinking about the best possible ways to use our segments, to tweak our content, to really wring the most amount of value out of the program in the last days that we have. So closing thought, and then I'd love to have folks weigh in with questions, share examples of things that are working or things that they're thinking about and want to share with other teams. I mentioned we have 24 days until voting stops. I know we've asked a lot of all of you so far, and we've demanded a lot, and we wanted to deliver a lot for our campaigns. On behalf of all of us, we all appreciate that immensely. We know that entering these last few weeks, it's only going to get more important and more intense. So want to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity to express our appreciation. And I mentioned this, when we kick off teams, I mentioned this in trainings and when new volunteers start. So many of you have heard it. But in these last 24 days, doing anything, anywhere is valuable. When I talk to all of my friends and I tell them, write some postcards, make some phone calls, now is the time, do whatever you can. So the general baseline is that at this time, anything that we can do is important. With that said, the fact that all of you are here and have found a place where you can use your very specialized skills and apply it to a very highly strategic and high leverage problem, that is, an immense opportunity. And it is really this just huge opportunity that we have to drive an impact at really, just one of the most important times that we could be focusing on this work. So I hope you all appreciate the impact that you are having on your teams, that we are collectively having at TFC, what that means for our democracy and the big picture. It's going to be a exciting and intense next 24 days, but hopefully we will feel like we earned every bit of the crushing victory that we will have on the 3rd in Pennsylvania and across the country. And so I thank you. I know Dylan, thanks you, all of us do, and we're in it together. So let's give it all we have. Let's leave everything on the field, and let's not miss an opportunity to deliver for our teams and our candidates. Thanks, Beryl. Crushing victory hashtag. I love it. Let's go with it. All right. So with that, wanted to turn it over. Any questions things we've talked about? Any ways to collaborate across teams? This is an opportunity to share knowledge, to show something off that you are excited about or that you think is working. So I'll open the floor, and I may call on people.
You had a hand from Sarah, Craig.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see it better, hopefully.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just throwing you on the bus here, Sarah.
I'm on Tara's ads team, and I would love, I know Craig and I talked about this in our meeting yesterday, but a template for the texting thread, if anyone has a Photoshop kind of file or any other cool kind of get out the vote graphics that are a little bit more adaptable to individual candidates. If people have anything like that or want anything like that from us, I would love to share files.
Yeah, for sure. And I see Natalie mentioned that that example was shared in the designers channel. So that's one spot certainly. But let's use the designers channel. The Pennsylvania channel is a great place to share the same concepts, to make sure that we've done some. We probably have more opportunity to take creative elements from ads teams and to bring them into emails and vice versa. So I would love to see those examples shared pretty broadly. Sarah, we will make sure you are added to the designers channel. Go for it, Tim. Yeah, mics are open.
Dylan, it's great that you're doing a template. We need it Monday, not Monday or Tuesday. We're presenting Monday some kind of a schedule. Is there any chance we could accelerate that?
We'll do our best. I'll let Manny know, and we can try and coordinate. But thanks for that call out, Tim. I appreciate it. The one thing I'd call out, just in terms of texting, Tim and Manny are working in Southwest PA with Pam and Harry Young Cochran. For folks who are in email marketing, that maybe this feels like old hat, but texting back in 2018 was the land of fun new toys. Basically anything you did would have a positive impact. And as your phones probably relay to you now, people are oversaturated with texts and they all kind of look the same. So there's definitely an opportunity for texting teams on this call to learn from what ads and email folks are doing, because they have to break out from the mold, because Facebook is so busy, because our inboxes are so busy. And we're in the midst of trying to learn what that looks like for texting.
That's great. And, you know, I guess the ask that I would make generally is that as we try different things in the next really week, there are certain things like that, you know, Don't Vote Naked ad that Team Dana has just started running that, you know, we can replicate versions of. It doesn't have to look exactly the same, but if a concept is working, don't wait to share it. If you see good results, flag it with your team, flag it with Pennsylvania Channel. Like there's really no time to waste for good knowledge sharing. So I would ask that folks keep an eye out for signs of life and proactively share those, and you know, talk to your counterpart for the same candidates. If there's an opportunity to say like, hey, we're getting really great click-throughs on this messaging to our supporters. I wonder if it's useful, you know, either in texting content or in ads content. So that's, I think, the opportunity that we have, and I think I really appreciate the extent to which teams have been working together for candidates to understand what folks are working on and how they can really make those messages work together. I know Team Tara Zrinsky has spent a whole bunch of time brainstorming strategy and thoughts, and that's awesome. So, and I know other teams are as well. So, appreciate all of that above and beyond. And again, you know, sharing sooner is better and preferred. Other questions, things that are bugging you, things that you need or haven't seen that you would like to see?
Craig, I have one question. This is
Yeah,
Tony. Do you know if anyone is pushing relational organizing in Pennsylvania? I'm working on that kind of stuff in Michigan, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I know you're working. Yeah, I was gonna say Michigan, but that's you. As far as the House campaigns that we're working with, I'm not aware of. I think maybe one campaign that escapes me who is thinking about using Reach, and I don't think as a PA House statewide. Some of the coordinated campaigns, so the Biden campaign working with some of the other races, there's an infrastructure for that. I think they might be doing some of it, but nothing super widespread that I'm aware of that directly interacts with our campaigns.
Yeah, there's intermittent use of, it sounds like, Outreach Circle, which has some kind of relational peer-to-peer texting, Tony, but it's not something we've encountered much at all. It's mostly just people kind of kicking the tires on that platform to see if it's useful.
But Tony, anything you learn in Michigan, don't keep it a secret. Don't let Rob have all the insights, please.
Yes, I mean, we don't know how effective it's going to be yet, but we, Cambria and I and Ken now are experts in the Reach tool. So if anyone does want information about that, you can reach out to me. But as far as actually getting volunteers to use it in an effective way, like that remains to be seen. We're working on it.
And action cards already pre-developed, which can also translate to Pennsylvania. So definitely, if you do end up using Reach, let us know.
Yeah.
Tony, are you doing vote tripling through that as well?
Not in exactly the traditional sense of like where you get people to tell you 3 names and et cetera, but I mean, it's in the same vein of like, will you get your friends to vote?
Of course. Okay, good to know.
Cool. Anything else before we let you have your Friday back? Awesome. Parting ask is, I hope, you know, keep sharing stuff in the Pennsylvania channel. That's a great opportunity for us to really share across teams, especially, you know, who knows what's going to happen, what sort of news or changes. Everything is changing by the day. So please use that forum to, if you see something that's interesting. I posted, there's a New York Times thing today. There's great insights there. That's our opportunity to really pass along things that are happening and understanding that things are happening by the day. So encourage folks to continue to use that channel and obviously reach out to any one of us, continue to connect with one another, and let's go do it. All right. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate your time. See you all soon.